Hello everyone on my channel. Today we will look at another shocking case, the story of Christy Shawn and Joseph Codd. Have you ever wondered how well you know your friends, co-workers, or neighbors? Can you trust them completely? Usually, friends know everything about us, but sometimes people who pretend to be our friends and gain our trust can later use our weaknesses if they want to betray or harm us. For most people, friendship is one of the most important elements that gives meaning to life. Supporting and helping friends is of utmost importance, but sometimes good intentions can turn into tragedy. The death of a young woman named Christy Shawn and her husband Joseph Codd in 2015 shocked the quiet provincial town of Leicester, North Carolina. This incident became one of the most high-profile and brutal crimes in the history of this small community. At the time of the tragedy, the couple was happily expecting an addition to the family. However, the most horrifying aspect was that their killer was someone they knew well, trusted, and considered a friend. Moreover, they were not his only victims. Christy Maria Shawn Codd was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain. She was the only child of American servicemen. Her father served in the United States Air Force, and due to the nature of his work, the family moved from place to place often. They did not stay in Spain for long. In the following years, the family lived in various European countries before returning to the United States. Christy began school in New Orleans, Louisiana, but after a year the family moved to Texas, then Illinois, after which the girl spent several years in Latin American countries. This nomadic lifestyle had its advantages. Christy spoke several languages from an early age and had the opportunity to get acquainted with the cultures and traditions of different countries. However, as a teenager, she had difficulty fitting in with new groups and making friends in new places. Just as she was beginning to get used to it, it was time to pack up again, move, change schools and social circles. It was because of the constant changes that she developed excellent communication skills. Christy easily found a common language with different people and was known as a sweet, sociable, and charming girl. In addition, from an early age, she was actively involved in sports, including gymnastics and swimming, and for some time she even attended kickboxing classes. When Christy graduated from school, her father retired, and the family settled in Biloxi, Mississippi. There, she finally found real friends and discovered a new hobby: cooking. The girl enjoyed cooking various dishes, experimented a lot in the kitchen, and her culinary masterpieces really deserved attention and praise. In the end, she decided to develop in this direction and took culinary courses. Her parents thought that she would become a professional chef, but Christy unexpectedly discovered another talent: acting. A beautiful and ambitious young woman full of talent, she entered an acting academy and moved to Los Angeles. She had a wide range of opportunities, and she skillfully used every opportunity to make a name for herself. Christy starred in commercials, performed on the stage, and also participated in some high-profile Hollywood productions as an extra or stunt woman. In particular, she had a small role in the Terminator franchise, where she performed quite risky stunts. In 2000, the young woman graduated from the academy, but by that time she had not received any significant or noticeable roles, despite her bright appearance and obvious talent. Then she decided to focus on her culinary skills and sports, turning these two hobbies into a rather profitable business. Christy participated in several popular culinary TV shows, which made her famous, turning her into a popular and recognizable figure. She reached the final of one of the seasons of the next Food Network Star, but unfortunately, the blonde did not win, as the judges ambiguously assessed her culinary experiments. However, Shawn was not too upset, as she managed to attract significant attention. Thousands of people followed her life and work on social networks. She actively promoted a healthy lifestyle, gave advice on proper nutrition, and even developed her own exercise routines to maintain good physical shape. About a year later, Christy founded and began to successfully develop her own catering company, which provided services for organizing banquets for various events, and also sold ready-made culinary products. The peculiarity of her business was that it focused on proper and healthy nutrition, and the menu featured her own original recipes, which she created and improved. Soon the young woman thought about creating her own farm, where healthy and organic products would be grown. This would help her expand her business in the catering industry. At the same time, she conducted online courses on proper nutrition and developed several other projects. In 2012, Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, better known as JT, who worked as a casting director on television and was responsible for selecting participants and actors for various rating projects. They first met at a studio in Los Angeles at a casting for a cooking show in which the young woman wanted to take part, and sympathy immediately arose between them. Joseph was almost 7 years older than Christy, had already been married before, but was in the process of divorce at the time of their meeting. He was completely captivated by the beauty and charisma of this charming blonde and began to court her. The young woman was not against his attention, and soon a romantic relationship began between them. Joseph shared and supported the ideas of his beloved, and together they began working on a project of their own farm. Soon the couple decided to leave Los Angeles and moved from sunny California to North Carolina. They sold a fairly successful and well-established catering business to Christy. Joseph sold his house in Hollywood, and they invested all the proceeds in the purchase of a large plot of land in the town of Leicester. The couple purchased a spacious and cozy house, as well as a plot of almost 1 acre to realize their dream. The man continued to collaborate with TV channels, but now he worked remotely, while the woman was actively developing her personal blog about proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. They were an ideal couple. Their relationship was distinguished by love and harmony. Soon the lovers decided to legitimize their relationship, and in August 2014 they had a lavish wedding, which was attended by several hundred guests, including relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and even some fans of the famous couple. They were truly happy and full of plans for their future together. 3 months after the wedding, the newlyweds learned that they were going to be parents for the first time. Their joy knew no bounds. After the new year, during a routine ultrasound examination, the doctor told the couple that they were expecting a daughter, and a few days later, during a phone conversation with her mother, Christy mentioned that they had decided to name their firstborn Skylar. Everything was going perfectly, the pregnancy was going smoothly, but the couple's happiness turned out to be tragically short-lived. Christy was 5 months pregnant and was actively preparing for the arrival of the baby. She called her parents, who lived in another state, almost every day, shared news about her health, and chatted with her mother for a long time, sometimes for an hour. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother was unable to get through to her daughter, but at first she did not attach much importance to this. The situation repeated itself the next day. Calls went through, but no one answered. The son-in-law's phone was also silent. When both of the couple's phones were turned off by March 15th, Christy's mother became concerned. Since Christy and Joseph's parents lived in other states, they couldn't quickly check on their children's home to make sure everything was okay. So Christy's mother called a close friend of her daughter's, a woman named Cecily, who lived nearby and could check on their home. When the friend arrived at the Codd's home, she saw that both of the couple's personal cars were parked outside the house. However, the front door was locked, and no one responded to knocking or shouting. The couple's phones had been turned off for 3 days, which was also highly suspicious. Through the window, Cecily saw that the couple's beloved dogs, which they adored and would never willingly leave alone, were locked in one of the rooms. The woman decided to go around the house and noticed that the lock on the back door was broken, indicating that someone had tried to get in or had actually gotten into the house. She immediately phoned Christy's mother, who immediately called the police. Arriving officers confirmed that the back door had been forced open and found a mess inside, indicating that someone had been searching for something. According to relatives, some valuables had been stolen, including a jewelry box belonging to the homeowner, and the safe in the couple's bedroom had been pried open. However, there was no sign of blood, a struggle, or evidence that the couple had been detained or taken away by force. In addition, the perpetrator had acted very carefully, leaving no fingerprints or DNA traces. Relatives clung to the faint hope that Joseph, 45, and his pregnant wife Christy, 38, were still alive, but seasoned officers were not optimistic in their prognosis. In the first days, the investigation simply reached a dead end. No clues or any significant evidence could be found. The missing couple had no enemies or ill-wishers, and it was difficult to reconstruct what happened even in general terms. The couple's phones were left at home, and were last used on March 12th. The following day, only incoming calls were recorded, after which the devices ran out of battery. The police decided to question the couple's neighbors to find out if they had noticed anything strange or suspicious recently. An interesting detail came to light. A neighbor living across the street saw another local resident throw a large package into a dumpster next to the Codd's house on the morning of March 15th. At the time, he did not attach any importance to this. But when he learned about the couple's disappearance, he thought that this information could be useful for the investigation. It was no longer possible to check the contents of the containers, since the garbage had been taken to the dumpster just the day before, and now any potential evidence would have to be found there. First of all, the police wanted to talk to the person who threw out the strange package. He turned out to be 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, who lived on the same street, was well acquainted with the couple, and was even considered a close friend of the family. Robert was a handyman who helped Christy and Joseph when they first moved into their new home. They became friends, and the couple later invited their new friend and neighbor to their own wedding. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious about it, except that other locals described Owens as a strange and unpredictable person. On March 16th, Robert was called to the police station for questioning. He initially denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed to have no knowledge of the package in question. At first, there was no basis for charging him other than the unconfirmed claims of another neighbor. However, that evening, the situation changed dramatically when the same large, strange package was found in a dump. Inside were items from the missing couple's home, including Robert's clear fingerprints and traces of DNA on partially burned clothes belonging to the couple, a blanket and a throw from their home, all stained with blood. This evidence confirmed the police suspicions that Christy and Joseph were no longer alive. Their doubts were finally dispelled when the police searched the suspect's home and found charred human remains in his wood stove. Robert was then brought in as a suspect in the brutal murder of his neighbor and his pregnant wife. Despite his denials and contradictory statements, he eventually confessed after several hours of questioning, and his confessions were truly shocking. He admitted to the double murder, but claimed it was an accident. According to him, on the evening of March 12th, he decided to visit friends, but while trying to avoid a collision with a dog, he went off the road and got stuck in the mud. He went to the Codd's house and asked for help to push the car out. The helpful couple agreed to help, and while they were pushing the car, Robert, sitting behind the wheel, allegedly accidentally confused the gas and brake pedals, hitting and running over the couple. Fearing that he would be accused of murder, he decided not to call the police or an ambulance, but instead decided to cover up the incident. Robert claimed that he returned to the Codd's house, broke down the back door, and took blankets from the bedroom to carry the bodies, which he was not sure were dead. He wrapped the bodies, put them in the back of his pickup truck, and drove them to his home, where he dismembered them in his bathroom using a saw and a small hatchet. He then lit a stove and began to gradually throw the body parts of his friends into the fire, hoping that they would burn completely. For some reason, he decided not to burn the bloody clothes, blankets, and shoes of the victims, but instead put them in a garbage bag and threw them in a dumpster, believing that after taking the garbage to the landfill, no one would be able to find anything. After all this, Robert claimed that he decided to stage a robbery, although in fact he himself robbed the house of his friends, stealing money and valuables, which he pawned the next day. The brutality with which Robert got rid of the bodies of his friends and the frightening calm with which he recounted the events shocked even experienced police officers. In his house, they found a saw and an axe, stained with blood, skin, and bone fragments of the victims. The accused did not even bother to clean the tools or try to hide them, being confident that the investigation would never lead to him, since he left no trace in the Codd's house. Forensic examination confirmed that the bone fragments found in the Owens stove belonged to the missing couple. Law enforcement agencies decided to look deeper into the suspect's past. Robert was unmarried, had no children, and had virtually no contact with his relatives. He previously lived in Asheville, North Carolina, but in 2000 he purchased land in Leicester and later built a home there. It turned out that his name was connected to an unsolved crime that had occurred 15 years earlier in Asheville. In 2000, Robert's close friend Zeb Wayne Quinn, who was only 18 at the time, mysteriously disappeared. Robert and Zeb had known each other since high school, were neighbors, and were friends. Zeb was in military training and also worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2, 2000, Quinn met Robert after his shift, planning to go to Leicester to buy a new car, but he never returned home. A few days later, his Mazda Protege was found parked in another part of town with its headlights on. A heart had been drawn on the inside of the glass in red lipstick. The owner of the car was never found. The car also had damage and scratches with traces of paint from another car. The last person to see Zeb was Robert, whose car was also damaged, and it turned out that the scratches contained paint chips from Zeb's car. Robert told a strange and unlikely story. According to him, shortly after they headed towards Leicester, Zeb blinked at him to stop. Zeb said that he had received a pager and urgently needed to use a payphone. He asked Robert to wait and drove to the nearest gas station, but returned 10 minutes later in a panic, said that their plans had changed, and then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting a friend's car along the way. It also turned out that Zeb was romantically involved with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose ex-boyfriend, Wesley Smith, threatened to kill Zeb if he did not stop seeing Misty. Taylor, Smith, and Owens were questioned in the case, but due to lack of evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had an alibi, but Robert did not. Zeb's considerable cash in case he decided to buy a car and his pager were missing from his car, and it was never determined what message, if any, he had received. The investigation leaned toward the theory that there was no message at all. Another oddity was that the day after Zeb disappeared, a man called Walmart claiming to be Zeb and saying he would be out of work for the next few days due to illness. However, the co-worker who answered the phone thought the voice sounded strange and unfamiliar, not at all like Zeb. The phone call was traced to the Volvo plant where Robert worked. When questioned, Owens unexpectedly claimed that he had made the call at the request of a friend the night before Zeb had sped away. With no new evidence or witnesses found, the case remained unsolved, with Zeb Quinn listed as missing. However, 15 years later, Owens was questioned again, suspected of being directly involved in the disappearance of his longtime friend. In June 2015, Zeb Quinn's case was reopened from the archives, and the investigation was reopened. However, at first, it seemed unlikely that law enforcement would be able to uncover any new information. Robert recounted the same story as in 2000, claiming that he had nothing to add. However, the police decided to conduct a more thorough search of his property, where they came across something very unusual. A strangely sealed cavity was discovered in a separate concrete slab on Owens' property, inside of which were small, heavily charred fragments of human bones. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged for DNA testing, so it was impossible to determine for sure whether they belonged to the missing Quinn. An interview with a neighbor yielded even more unexpected results. An elderly man living nearby remembered something from January 2000, when young Owens had just bought the land and was starting to build his house. One evening, he lit a fire that gave off a sickeningly sweet smell. The neighbor even reprimanded him because the wind was blowing in his direction, which almost made him sick. Even after that, the fire site was filled with concrete, which seemed very unusual, but Robert claimed that he had planned to build a small fountain there, which he never did. The neighbor forgot about the stinking fire until 15 years later, when the police showed up on the property. Eventually, Owens confessed to his involvement in the crime, telling a completely new story. According to him, Zeb was killed by his own uncle, Walter Owens, who was hired by Wesley Smith to eliminate Misty's new boyfriend, whom he still loved. Robert claimed that he did not know this at the time, and that his uncle had asked him to lure the young man to a secluded area. When the three found themselves in a wooded area on the road to Leicester, his uncle ordered them to stop the car, then signaled Quinn to do the same. As soon as the young man came out, Walter shot him silently, then ordered his nephew to help dismember and pack the body, which was burned on Robert's property that same night and covered with concrete. It was no longer possible to question Walter Owens, as he had died several years before his nephew's horrific confession. No evidence was found at the alleged crime scene, and the story sounded very unconvincing. Robert was initially charged with double first-degree murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment and concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery. All of these charges could have led to the death penalty, but it turned out that the defendant had long suffered from depression and mental disorders and was taking strong medications, which his lawyer used as the basis for his defense. With a well-constructed defense strategy, the defendant could have been found insane and sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison, which did not suit either the prosecutor's office or the relatives of the victims. At the same time, an investigation was launched into the Quinn case, from which the criminal could also get away with it. In 2017, the defendant agreed to a plea deal, pleading guilty to the murder of the Codds in exchange for a guaranteed exclusion of the death penalty from potential sentences. In this case, he was found guilty of second-degree manslaughter, dismemberment and burning of bodies, burglary, and robbery. In total, he was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, Owens made another deal with the authorities, this time in the Quinn case. However, he only pleaded guilty to accessory to murder and assistance in concealing evidence. For this crime, he received an additional 12 years, which were added to his already effectively life sentence. After the verdict, the killer addressed the court asking for forgiveness from the relatives of the people he killed. He again protested his innocence, attributing everything to an accident and citing his mental illness and the influence of powerful drugs that had impaired his judgment. However, the relatives of Christy and Joseph Codd, as well as Quinn's family, did not believe him. They have never reconciled themselves to the term manslaughter and believe that in both cases the man acted deliberately and for selfish reasons.